Separation is not rejection, it is preparation. Many people feel discouraged when they are pulled away from familiar places, relationships, or routines, but in spiritual growth, separation is often the first stage of elevation. When God begins to remove you from the environments you are used to, it is rarely a sign that something is wrong. It is usually a sign that something greater is being set in motion. God sees the future long before we do, and because of that, He knows which attitudes, influences, habits, or connections will not support the destiny He is preparing for us. Instead of allowing those things to slow or sabotage His plan, He separates us from them to make room for development, clarity, and growth. During separation, people may feel lonely, misunderstood, or even abandoned. The absence of noise, activity, and familiar support can feel like rejection. But in reality, this is the season where God trains the mind, strengthens the spirit, and shapes the character of a person. Most breakthroughs and callings are birthed in hidden places. When distractions are stripped away, a person can finally focus on hearing God's voice, recognizing who they are, and understanding the purpose they have been designed to fulfill. A seed must be buried before it can grow. Likewise, a person must often be set apart before they can step forward. Preparation takes time. God uses silence, separation, and stillness to refine desires, increase discipline, and expand vision. If nothing changed in a person's environment, nothing would change in their life. In truth, many people are not being pushed away, they are being positioned. So instead of viewing separation as the end of something, it should be seen as the beginning of transformation. What looks like rejection is often the doorway to becoming exactly who God intended. When God removes you from comfort, He is moving you into calling. Comfort is a beautiful place, but it rarely produces growth. Many times people settle in environments that feel safe, predictable, and familiar. They stay in jobs, routines, relationships, or mindsets that feel easy, even when those places are not aligned with destiny. God, however, is committed to purpose more than comfort. When the season comes for a person to step into their true calling, He often disturbs the very areas they have grown accustomed to. This disruption can feel uncomfortable or confusing, but it is actually the gentle push of a loving God who refuses to let His children stay smaller than what He designed them to be. Moving out of comfort may look like doors closing, plans shifting, opportunities changing, or relationships transitioning. Instead of seeing these moments as setbacks, they should be viewed as signs of movement. When God begins to unsettle the familiar, it means He is preparing a person for a new assignment. Growth demands stretching, calling demands courage, and destiny requires stepping into unknown territory. Every great move of God in a person's life begins with a moment where comfort is interrupted. In these seasons, faith becomes essential. Remaining in comfort usually means relying on what we can see and control. Moving into calling requires trusting God in areas that are beyond our understanding. It teaches surrender, dependence, and obedience. God removes comfort to remind His children that their source is not their environment. It is Him. Although the process may feel difficult, the results are powerful. When a person finally leaves comfort, new potential emerges, hidden abilities awaken, and clarity strengthens. They discover that what felt like loss was only the beginning of a greater gain. God never pulls someone from comfort to leave them empty. He does it to position them for the life they were truly created to live. When God initiates divine separation, it is a sign that your next season requires refinement. Many people desire elevation, influence, or greater spiritual depth, but they often overlook the reality that every higher level requires greater maturity. Refinement is the process through which God shapes character, strengthens faith, and prepares a person to carry the weight of their calling. Just as gold is purified by fire, our purpose is purified in seasons of separation. When God pulls someone aside, He is creating the conditions needed for transformation. Without outside noise, distractions, or conflicting voices, a person becomes more sensitive to God's guidance and more aware of the areas in their lives that need growth. Refinement is not punishment. It is investment. God would never send someone into a large assignment with small capacity. He develops capacity through seasons where a person must learn perseverance, self-discipline, focus, emotional maturity, and spiritual resilience. In these moments, many people feel uncomfortable because refinement often reveals weaknesses, wounds, and habits that must be corrected. It is in solitude that God heals broken attitudes, reshapes thinking, and uproots limiting beliefs. What people interpret as isolation is often the operating room where God performs the inner work that can't be done in the spotlight. Refinement also protects. If a person reaches a place of influence or responsibility without the inner strength to sustain it, success can collapse under pressure. God separates to ensure that when the blessing arrives, the person is ready, spiritually stable, mentally strong, and emotionally grounded. Without refinement, calling becomes heavy. With refinement, calling becomes powerful. So when God separates you, it is because He sees what you are about to face and knows what you must become. He is preparing you not just to enter the next season, but to thrive in it. The refinement may be uncomfortable, but it is shaping you into someone capable, confident, and spiritually aligned for what is coming. When God takes you away from what limits you, it is because He intends to expand you. Many people live within invisible barriers, mindsets, environments, relationships, habits, or fears that silently restrict who they can become. These limitations often feel normal because they have been present for so long. A person may not even realize they are confined until God begins to shift them out of what they have always known. When this transition starts, it can be uncomfortable, confusing, or even painful. But it is actually a sign that God is clearing away the ceilings that have kept them from growing. God sees the potential that people often overlook in themselves. He knows when a person has reached the limit of what a certain environment can offer. And rather than allow them to remain stagnant, He begins to orchestrate change. This change may come through closed doors, new opportunities, sudden shifts, or even the removal of certain people. What looks like disruption is divine direction. God is not taking something from a person. He is making space to give something to them. Sometimes the limitation comes from comfort. It is easy to settle where things feel safe and predictable, but comfort rarely leads to greatness. Other times, the limitation is emotional. Fear, doubt, insecurity, or a lack of belief. God separates people from these limiting pressures so that they can develop new strength and confidence. He is not just changing their surroundings, He is transforming their mindset, increasing their faith, and preparing them to operate on a larger scale. When God pulls someone out of limitation, He is preparing them for opportunities, influence, impact, and spiritual growth that their old environment could not sustain. What feels like loss is often the removal of walls. What feels like displacement is actually elevation in disguise. God doesn't separate to restrict. He separates to enlarge, to stretch, and to lead a person into more than they ever imagined. When God separates you, He is also revealing your true identity and purpose. Many people define themselves by the roles they play, the environments they come from, or the opinions of others. As long as they remain surrounded by certain voices, expectations, or influences, they may never discover who they were truly created to be. Separation becomes the moment when God removes external definitions so He can reveal an internal calling. When familiar things are stripped away, a person is left face to face with themselves, and this is where authentic identity begins to emerge. In seasons of separation, God quiets the noise that competes with His voice. People who once influenced decisions are no longer present, Environments that once shaped thinking lose their grip. Opportunities that kept a person busy may suddenly slow down. It may feel uncomfortable, but this silence and distance are intentional. God wants His children to discover who they are beyond titles, achievements, relationships, or circumstances. He wants them to see themselves as He sees them. Chosen, capable, gifted, and called. Purpose is rarely revealed in the crowd. It unfolds in stillness, where reflection and divine direction meet. God uses separation to shift a person from asking, "Who do they expect me to be?" to "Who did God create me to be?" This transition is powerful because identity becomes rooted not in approval, but in spiritual truth. When identity becomes clear, purpose becomes undeniable. This process also exposes what no longer aligns with destiny. People, habits, or environments that once seemed helpful may now be revealed as limiting. God allows this clarity so a person can make choices based on calling rather than comfort. Separation is the moment where confusion fades and self-awareness deepens. It is where a person stops living from memory and starts living from vision. Through this process, identity becomes strong, purpose becomes visible, and destiny begins to unfold. When God separates you, it's often because you cannot carry everyone into your destiny. Some connections are only meant for a season. Many people struggle with the idea of letting go, especially when the relationships or environments in question have been part of their lives for a long time. But spiritual growth demands understanding that not every person who started with you is meant to finish with you. Some individuals were essential for a previous chapter, but not suitable for the one ahead. Just as every teacher does not follow a student into graduation, not every companion can follow you into destiny. God sees what we cannot. He knows which relationships will support our future and which ones will hold us back. Some people drain your energy, challenge your focus, distract your walk, or dilute your commitment. Others may not be bad, but their vision is too small to contain what God is building in you. If they cannot understand your growth, they may unintentionally discourage it. Rather than allowing these influences to restrict your development, God begins to create distance. Sometimes this separation happens through emotional shifts. Conversations feel different, priorities clash, or the connection no longer feeds your spirit the way it once did. Other times circumstances change. People move, opportunities adjust, or paths naturally diverge. However separation comes, it is not rejection, it is alignment. God protects calling by removing anything that would slow or sabotage it. Carrying everyone into destiny can also create weight. Emotional attachment, guilt, or fear of disappointing others can pressure a person into staying where they no longer belong. God separates to break those emotional chains so that purpose is not sacrificed for comfort or loyalty. When God allows certain people or environments to fade, it is because He is making room for relationships, mentors, and partners who fit your future. Letting go is not loss. It is preparation for greater alignment, purpose, and elevation. When God isolates you, it is not to leave you alone, but to elevate you. Many breakthroughs begin in moments where life feels quiet, unfamiliar, or unexpectedly distant from the familiar comforts of the past. In these seasons, it may feel like God has pulled you back while others are moving forward. But heaven's pattern often involves elevation that begins in hidden places. When a person is surrounded by noise, constant activity, or too many opinions, it becomes difficult for God to work deeply within them. Isolation creates the stillness necessary for transformation. Elevation requires clarity, focus, and spiritual sharpening. And these can only happen when distractions are removed. God knows the responsibilities and pressures that come with the next level of calling, so He prepares His servants by giving them seasons where their faith, discipline, and spiritual sensitivity grow stronger. In isolation, people learn to rely on God rather than on the support or validation of others. They begin to develop internal strength that is not dependent on applause, approval, or presence of a crowd. This season also helps reveal what is inside a person. When you have fewer people to lean on, your true character, mindset, and spiritual state become visible. God uses this space to prune weaknesses, heal past wounds, and expand inner capacity. The elevation coming requires stronger character, deeper vision, and greater resilience, and all of that is created in private long before it is visible in public. When God isolates someone, He is not punishing them, He is trusting them. It means He sees potential that others may not yet see. He knows what is waiting on the other side and is preparing the person to carry it with wisdom and strength. Isolation is the bridge between calling and fulfillment. What feels like being set aside is actually being set above. God isolates not to reduce you, but to raise you. And the elevation that follows makes the season worthwhile. When God prepares to use someone greatly, He often begins by setting them apart quietly. This pattern appears throughout spiritual history. Before a public assignment begins, there is usually a private season of separation. This is because calling is not built on noise, crowds, or applause. Calling is built on quiet formation. In solitude, God shapes the heart, sharpens vision, and strengthens character. He removes the distractions that compete with His voice so that the person He is preparing can hear clearly, think clearly, and grow deeply. Being set apart can feel unsettling at first. People may wonder why doors closed, why opportunities slowed, or why certain relationships shifted. But what seems like a pause is more like planting. A seed does its greatest growing while hidden beneath the soil. And likewise, people do some of their greatest developing when no one is watching. In this hidden season, God teaches lessons that cannot be learned in the spotlight. Lessons of obedience, humility, discipline, and reliance on Him rather than on human support. Quiet separation is also a safeguard. If promotion comes before preparation, pressure can break a person rather than elevate them. God chooses to work silently so that when the moment of public calling arrives, the person has the strength, wisdom, and spiritual foundation to carry it. He builds roots so deep that no storm can uproot them later. In silence, a person learns to hear God for themselves. They are no longer shaped by the expectations of people or the opinions of the crowd, but by divine direction. Identity becomes anchored, vision becomes clearer, and calling becomes undeniable. And when God finally exposes what He has been developing in the dark, it is strong, stable, and ready to make impact. So when God sets someone apart quietly, it is not insignificance. It is preparation for significance. The hidden season is proof that something powerful is on the way. When God separates you, He creates space for revelation. In the rush of daily life, surrounded by responsibilities, conversations, opinions, and constant movement, it becomes difficult to hear the deeper voice of direction. People often live reactive lives, making decisions based on pressure, routine, or the expectations of others. Separation disrupts that pattern. When God pulls someone away from familiar environments, it is to give them the stillness required to receive clarity they could not access before. In moments of separation, distractions that once filled the mind begin to fade. The silence that feels uncomfortable at first becomes fertile ground for understanding. With fewer voices around, a person becomes more aware of God's guidance, their own spirit, and the deeper truths that have been waiting to surface. Revelation is not simply information. It is insight that changes how a person sees themselves, their purpose, and their path. God often cannot give that revelation until He first rearranges the environment. Separation also shifts focus. Instead of looking around for answers, the person begins looking upward and inward. Questions that once went ignored now demand attention. Why am I here? What is God trying to show me? What needs to change? In this reflective space, God reveals what needs to be corrected, what needs to be released, and what needs to be embraced. Sometimes the revelation is about the next assignment. Other times it is about identity, healing, direction, discipline, or the condition of the heart. Many breakthroughs happen in these quiet seasons. God may reveal the next step, the next opportunity, or the next version of who He is shaping the person to become. Without separation, these revelations would be lost in the noise of everyday life. So what feels like distance is actually God clearing the air so that revelation can reach the heart without interruption. Separation is not just a pause, it is the place where vision is born. When God separates you, it is often because destiny demands discipline and distance from distractions. Many people pray for breakthrough, promotion, or deeper spiritual growth, yet remain surrounded by habits, environments, and influences that do not support the next level. God knows that purpose is not fulfilled casually. It requires focus, strength, and intentional living. So when He begins to remove you from certain circles or situations, it is because He is creating the space you need to grow with discipline. Discipline is difficult to develop in environments filled with noise or temptation. If everyone around a person is living without vision, it becomes easy to follow the same pattern. If the people closest to you lack drive, it is challenging to maintain momentum. God, in His wisdom, sometimes isolates a person so they can build spiritual muscles without interference. It is in these private seasons that habits change, thinking shifts, priorities sharpen, and character deepens. Destiny has weight, and without discipline, a person may not have the strength to carry it. Distance is also necessary because distractions, even harmless ones, can delay purpose. A distraction is anything that consumes time, energy, or focus without contributing to destiny. It may be certain relationships, conversations, activities, or emotional attachments. God removes these not to punish, but to protect. He knows that a divided mind cannot walk a straight path. When God separates you, He is saying, I need your attention, not partial attention, complete attention. In this season, people often discover consistency in prayer, clarity in decisions, and strength in areas they struggled before. Without distractions, the voice of God becomes louder and more recognizable. Discipline becomes a lifestyle instead of a struggle. Purpose becomes pursuit instead of possibility. What felt like isolation becomes training. When God separates you, He is preparing you to walk into destiny with focus, excellence, and spiritual maturity. When God separates you, not everyone will understand it, and that is perfectly okay. People often see your life from the outside, while God is working on the inside. To others, your withdrawal, changed priorities, or new direction may seem confusing, abrupt, or unnecessary, but they do not see the spiritual alignment taking place. They are unaware of the preparation happening in your spirit, the growth God is producing in your character, and the future God is shaping for you. This is why separation can sometimes feel lonely. Not because you are alone, but because others cannot interpret what God is doing in your life. Human beings tend to evaluate seasons based on what is visible. Activity, success, crowds, and outward progress. But God works in a different dimension. He measures by purpose, obedience, and spiritual development. When God pulls you into a quiet or different place, people may misjudge you. Some may think you are losing pace. Others may believe you are stepping back instead of forward. But a person walking with God must learn not to depend on human applause or understanding. Divine calling requires divine approval, not public validation. This is why the opinions of others must not determine your obedience. The moments where people misunderstand you are often the very moments where God is positioning you. Many of the greatest transformations in Scripture happened in silence, away from crowds, away from affirmation, and away from spectators. People only saw the results later. They did not witness the refining process that made those results possible. So do not be discouraged if others cannot see your path. They were not meant to. God is not speaking to them about your journey. He is speaking to you. Separation is not required to be understood. It is required to be obeyed. In time, the same people who question your season will witness the purpose behind it. The fruit will explain the process. When God separates you, He is protecting your calling by removing what could destroy it. People often see separation as loss, but in reality, it is divine security. God knows the future in ways we cannot. He sees the dangers that are hidden, the influences that are subtle, and the relationships or habits that might look harmless today, but could damage destiny tomorrow. Instead of allowing these threats to grow or reach a breaking point, He intervenes early by creating distance. Sometimes the protection comes from removing certain people. Not everyone in your circle has your best interest at heart. Some lack the character, loyalty, or spirituality to walk with you into your future. Others may unintentionally weaken your commitment, distract your focus, or influence decisions that pull you away from your assignment. God sees this long before we do, and in His mercy, He separates you to keep calling intact. Other times the protection comes through shutting doors. Maybe an opportunity disappears, a plan changes, or a transition happens suddenly. It may feel disappointing in the moment, but God knows that certain positions, environments, or platforms could damage your integrity, drain your spirit, or pull you out of alignment. What looks like a missed opportunity is often a divine no that protects your destiny. God also separates to protect the inner life, your peace, clarity, and spiritual strength. Too much noise, too much influence, or too many demands can cloud vision and soften conviction. Separation becomes the shield that preserves your spiritual sharpness. If separation did not happen, some people would walk into their calling unprepared, exposed, or surrounded by danger they cannot yet see. God steps in before the damage occurs. So instead of asking, why did this leave my life? A better question is, what did God just save me from? The separation you experience today may be the very thing that keeps your calling alive tomorrow. When God separates you from the familiar, it is because the path to the supernatural rarely runs through comfort. Familiar environments are predictable, controllable, and safe, but they can also become spiritual ceilings. When a person stays too long in what is familiar, they risk growing dependent on their surroundings rather than on God. The supernatural requires trust, faith, obedience, and movement into unknown territory. To produce that faith, God often removes what is comfortable so you can experience Him in a deeper way. In familiar places, a person knows how to survive. But in unfamiliar places, they learn how to believe. The supernatural is not revealed in situations where human ability is enough. It is revealed in situations where only God can intervene. When God separates you, He's preparing you for encounters, miracles, and breakthroughs that require reliance on Him instead of routine. You can't walk on water while staying in the boat. You can't see the Red Sea part while staying in Egypt. God separates His children from the ordinary so He can show them the extraordinary. Separation also shifts perspective. When you step away from what has always been, you begin seeing possibilities that were never visible before. Faith expands, vision stretches, limitations fall away. What once felt impossible becomes achievable because God becomes the source instead of circumstances. The unfamiliar becomes holy ground where you learn God's voice in new ways, see His provision differently, and experience His power more personally. Many of the greatest spiritual transformations happen after separation. Abraham leaving home, Moses leaving the palace, Elijah leaving the familiar, the disciples leaving everything they knew. None encountered the supernatural until they stepped away from what was comfortable. So when God pulls you out of the familiar, do not fear it. It is the doorway to deeper revelation, greater faith, and miraculous experiences you would have never encountered if you had stayed where you were. The separation that challenges you today may be the very path that leads you into the supernatural tomorrow. When God separates you, what feels uncomfortable today will make sense tomorrow. In the moment, separation can feel painful, confusing, or even unfair. People may not understand why certain relationships ended, why opportunities closed, or why circumstances shifted so suddenly. In real time, it can feel like loss. But God sees the full picture, while we see only a single frame. What you experience as disruption today is often the foundation for something greater that you cannot yet see. Like a builder clearing land before construction, God sometimes has to remove what is standing before He can raise what is coming. Growth often requires discomfort. When a seed breaks open in the soil, the process does not look pleasant, yet it is necessary for life to emerge. In the same way, separation breaks what is familiar, stable, or predictable, so new strength, character, and vision can develop. People rarely see these changes as positive while they are happening. It is only after time passes that the purpose becomes clear. Looking back, many realize that if God had not removed certain things, they would have remained limited, distracted, or spiritually stagnant. In hindsight, the very moments that felt like setback were actually divine setups. God also allows discomfort to build trust. When everything is predictable, dependence becomes limited. But when familiar things are gone, people learn to lean on God in new ways. They pray deeper, listen more carefully, and surrender more fully. Their faith matures and their spirit grows. Later, when they step into the blessing or breakthrough God prepared, it becomes obvious that the discomfort was not punishment, it was preparation. Time has a way of revealing divine intention. The tears of today often become the testimony of tomorrow. When the new door opens, when the right people arrive, when the purpose becomes visible, suddenly the pieces fit. And then you realize God never abandoned you. He was guiding you the entire time. When God separates you, it is the ultimate sign that He has already chosen you. Separation is not random, it is intentional. God does not pull a person aside unless He has already seen something in them that He intends to develop. Long before others recognize your calling, God sees the potential, the gifting, and the assignment within you. Separation is His way of placing you into the process that shapes chosen individuals. It means heaven has begun to invest in your future. When you are chosen, your journey will often look different from those around you. While others may seem to move freely, God may place restrictions, closed doors, or unexpected shifts in your path. This is not because you are behind, it is because you are being guided differently. People who are chosen cannot walk casually through life the way everyone else does because their destiny carries greater weight, responsibility, and impact. God protects those He chooses by managing their path carefully. Being chosen also means God is preparing you privately before He elevates you publicly. Many people want the calling, but not the process, the stage, but not the shaping. But God knows that true purpose can only be carried by someone whose character has been refined, whose faith has been strengthened, and whose identity has been secured. Separation becomes the training ground for this inner transformation. The hidden season is where chosen individuals learn endurance, discernment, obedience, and spiritual maturity. At times, being chosen can feel isolating. You may wonder why your path is harder, why your transitions are sharper, or why you are being pulled away from people or environments others get to remain in. The reason is simple. You are being prepared for something they are not assigned to carry. God separates who He selects. If He is drawing you away from the crowd, it is evidence that He has set a calling over your life that requires focus, molding, and divine preparation. Separation is not the beginning of rejection. It is the proof that you have been chosen,